Good afternoon and welcome to Capital Account. I'm Lauren Lister here in Washington, D.C., and these are your headlines for Friday, August 10th, 2012. The Justice Department, well, it's official. It says it won't bring charges against Goldman Sachs or any of its employees for financial fraud related to the mortgage crisis. This is following a year-long investigation. What? Is this justice? Or as Gerald Celente has often said, is it just us? Big bankers getting away with whatever we want. We'll ask them. That said, have we found someone to take on the big banks? Benjamin Lawsky, superintendent of the New York State Department of Financial Services. He threatened to revoke Standard Chartered's banking license after accusing the bank of laundering billions for Iran's financial institutions. This has set off what appears to be a backlash from federal regulators. So are they going after this New York regulator for doing his job, or is the regulator going rogue? We'll discuss. Plus, the LIBOR benchmark interest rates are no longer fit for purpose, says Britain's financial regulator, also saying the future of other benchmarks for everything from oil to gold to stock prices is also under scrutiny. So we ask, is there anywhere to invest that's not rigged? We'll find out. Let's get to today's Capital Account. All right, happy Friday, and I don't know how happy this is for our audience, but as I said at the top of the show, the Justice Department says it will not bring charges against Goldman Sachs or any of its employees for financial fraud related to the mortgage crisis. This is following their year-long investigation. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, the Justice Department said the burden of proof simply could not be met to prosecute Goldman based on claims that were made in an extensive Senate panel report that was from 2011. And in the report, for example, Senator Carl Levin, the chairman of the Senate subcommittee, said Goldman executives lied to Congress about the firm's bets against the housing market. The accusation triggered a Justice Department probe of possible perjury. The report also concluded that even as securities firms flooded the market with securitized mortgages and advised clients to buy them, firms privately used words like crap and flying pig to describe the financial instruments. Now, this whole episode was enough to give birth to dramatic scenes like this in Senate hearings.
You have an adverse interest to your client when you're selling something to them. Do you have the responsibility to tell that client of your adverse interest? That's my question.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to understand.
No, I think you understand it. I don't think you want to answer.
There were many scenes like that. That was over the Abacus deal, where Goldman didn't tell investors that the hedge fund Paulson & Co. had helped choose the securities in the deal and, oh yeah, was betting against it. Speaks volumes for those securities. And Timberwolf, that CDO, remember that, where they hawked debt, including mortgage securities, reportedly that they expected to perform poorly. That gave birth to scenes like this.
You didn't tell them you thought it was a deal?
Well, I didn't say that.
No. Who did? Your people, internally. You knew it was a deal, and that's what your email shows.
I think
we had to bleep that, but I think you probably remember that episode quite well. This was all enough for lawsuits and civil settlements with regulators, mind you. There was the $500 million+ one that the SEC settled with Goldman over the Abacus deal with. This wasn't enough to prosecute anyone, though. So what's wrong here? Is it the law? Is it the lawyers? Is it my frame of mind? Am I just seriously misguided? Well, let's ask Gerald Celente, founder of Trends Research Institute and publisher of the Trends Journal, because he has his pulse on all of this. First, Gerald Celente, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always wonderful to have you on.
And always my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, especially on a Friday. It's a nice way to round out the week, although I wish I had better news to report than this story that there will be no charges for financial fraud related to the mortgage crisis for Goldman Sachs. So, Gerald Celente, really? The Justice Department couldn't find anything?
They never find anything. You didn't see any charges come up against John Corzine with the MF Global scandal. He can't find, $1.6 billion. You mentioned about Goldman Sachs being fined over $500 million. What was it, 2 weeks ago? HSBC being fined for money laundering. And it's more than just the financial institutions. Just this week, Blackwater, you know, that wonderful mercenary firm that keeps changing its name.
Yeah.
They just got fined for selling arms, and they were fined again a few years earlier. You look at what's gone on in just this year, over $8 billion in fines collected from drug companies, from military contractors and mercenary contractors, from the financial institutions. You don't see one head roll. This is to call it a justice system is criminal. It's not a criminal justice system. You have a bunch of flunkies, a bunch of suck-ups, and a bunch of bureaucratic lightweights that keep swinging through revolving doors from government to the so-called investigation agencies and enforcement agencies that bow down to their old bosses and suck up to power. When are people going to see the truth? How many times do you need to read all about it? It's there every day. Look what happened in the LIBOR scandal. What, $700 trillion worth of dough being regulated, rigged game? And what does Robert Diamond do, the former CEO of Barclays? Oh, I'm sorry. And he leaves with over $100 million. The game is rigged from top to bottom. You're right. The word justice, as we say, is being misspelled. It's J-U-S-T-U-S. Don't get caught stealing a sandwich out of a 7-Eleven.
Right.
Boy, will they pounce on you.
Right. I know. And just to show that contrast, Gerald, there was a story that a former employee of Goldman Sachs now faces state authorities in New York after he already faced federal charges, was convicted. That case was appealed. Now the state authorities are after him for stealing software from Goldman Sachs. It's like, don't you dare do anything criminal against Goldman Sachs. But if you are Goldman Sachs or an executive, you can steal from investors and you'll be just fine. Is that does that illustrate this issue we're talking about?
Yeah, the cops go after the low-hanging fruit. Let's call it what it is. Go occupy Wall Street. You see how tough they get. You know, be a small guy on the chain or a small woman in the scam. Boy, do they whack you down. But not if your name's John Corzine. Oh, and by the way, the law firm that MF Global used is attached to the Attorney General and Assistant Attorney General's law firm. I mean, what are you, 6 years old? You can't see through this stuff? Look at one after another. The game is rigged. Look what happened about a week ago. A jury found this guy that the feds were trying to prosecute from Citigroup, and they let him go because they asked, I wanted to know, this is from the foreman of the jury, I wanted to know why the bank's CEO wasn't brought up on trial. I'll tell you why. It's very simple. They're better than us. That's right. They're better than we are. They make hundreds of millions of dollars doing dirty deals. We have to work for a living. We're the suckers. We pay for their criminality. And that's what's happened in America. And by the way, look what China is doing to that person. You know, they're ready to execute her.
Yeah.
And look at the Iranians that everybody hates. They just found 4 bankers guilty, and they're talking about executing them. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see some high-level executions going on. Let the heads roll on Wall Street, and maybe, as they love to say, that will send a message to the rest of them.
Well, that's certainly, I'm not going to disagree with you there. That would send a message. I guess short of that, what do you think would change this situation? Because as we both talked about, there are plenty of civil settlements. So there are plenty of these civil cases where these huge corporations and these Wall Street firms do settle for millions of dollars over these charges. But what do you think it would take to get criminal prosecutions. Would it require changing the law? Because I keep seeing this issue of the burden of proof is just too high when it comes to fraud criminally in the way that the law is written, the letter of the law. Is that the problem, or is it, no, it's not, it's the lawyers or the people that are pursuing these cases?
It's the white collar crime business. They have the best mouthpieces in the world, and they're all tied together. Isn't it a coincidence, by the way, that John Corzine, you know, the guy, as I said, can't find $1.6 million out of robbing it from segregated funds like my own? Isn't it funny that the guy who's the head of the Commodities Future Trading Commission, Gary Gensler, was also a guy from the Goldman Sachs gang and under the tutelage of Corzine when he was the CEO of the Goldman Sachs gang? It's one big club and we're not in it. Let's call it what it is. It's the merger of state and corporate powers called fascism. And under a fascist regime, the little people get slapped down at will, and all the guys at the top of the chain, the mafia, the banking mafia, and the political dons, they all get a free ride. How much more proof do you need? Again, go outside the banking industry. Look at GlaxoSmithKline. Look at Merck. Look at Johnson & Johnson. Have you seen one head roll? Oh, yeah, the government collects money so they could pay their guys and keep getting more money to keep their game going, and none of the big heads roll. Oh, and by the way, if you get caught stealing that chicken sandwich 3 times, then it's 3 strikes, you're out, and now you're doing hard time with some guy that got caught selling, you know, an ounce of weed. So let's put this into perspective.
No, I know. I do think that's important. That said, I don't think you can see this, Gerald, but I can. We have the front page of your Trends Journal behind me where we have Jesus chasing the bankers out of the temple. I'm assuming this is a reference to when Jesus chased the money changers out of the temple, which was in the Bible, from what I understand. I guess the question here, is this more of a moral issue now? The law has failed to go after these untouchable guys, and this is really about morality in this country and, I don't know, instilling some of it?
Yeah, you know, again, this is as old. That's why we put that picture up there. It's as old as history. It's the greedy stealing from the rest of the people. It's usury. That's all it is. I mean, look at the deal now. You put your money in the banks and you don't get anything in return, and they're borrowing money for nothing virtually, and they're loaning it out at the highest interest rates they can, particularly if you have a credit card. So it's nothing has changed. Yes, it's about morality. That's all it's about. Pick up the paper this last week in New York. Oh, these 5 guys that they accused of killing a cab driver or somebody. Oh, they're innocent now. How many people have been innocent that have been proven guilty by, quote, overzealous prosecutors? They could use the letter of the law when they want to. They just don't use it for their friends. And yes, it's an issue of morality. Again, not in a religious sense, only in a factual sense. I have an idea. Let's start a war over in Iraq. We'll say that the cat has weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda, even though he doesn't. We'll kill 1 million+ people, cost us $1 trillion, sacrifice the lives of our troops and their limbs and their lives and their families' lives, and we'll just keep it going, and we'll call it a victory and leave.
And Gerald Celente, it sounds like a nightmare. If only that was the case. Unfortunately, you just laid out a lot of true statements there. We're going to keep discussing this, though. We're going to go to a break. We'll be back with more with Gerald Celente, founder of Trends Research Institute, publisher of the Trends Journal. Also still ahead, you responded, I'll answer. Check out if your comment caught my eye this week in viewer feedback. But first, your closing market numbers.
drives the world?
The fear-mongering used by politicians.
Who makes decisions?
Considerable breakthrough has already been made.
Who can you trust?
No one who is imbued with a global missionary zeal.
Where are we heading?
State-controlled capitalism is called fascism.
When nobody dares to ask, we do. RT, question more.
Welcome back. Before the break, my guest and I were discussing a seemingly systemic lack of political will to go after any kind of high-level executives or big corporations when it comes to criminal charges, criminal wrongdoing, and really pursuing that. That said, is there someone that has shown that they could really go after the big banks? Because this New York regulator is really going after Standard Chartered, apparently, over allegations of the bank using its New York office to launder billions of dollars for Iran's financial institutions and central bank. Now, Reuters reports the Treasury Department and the Fed were blindsided and are irate. So some are saying this New York regulator has gone rogue, and some are saying finally someone is taking on the big banks. So I want to get my guest's reaction, but first I want to tell you what Neil Barofsky's reaction was, because he was the former Special Inspector General in charge of TARP oversight. And he says this guy's just doing his job, and they'd rather trash a potentially legitimate case than admit that they were asleep at the switch, especially now after the recent revelations about their failures with LIBOR and HSBC. Now, he, of course, is talking about regulators. So a few different issues to address here. Let's bring back Gerald Celente, founder of Trends Research Institute, publisher of the Trends Journal, to give us his thoughts on this. So, Gerald, we hear that this New York regulator, maybe he's going rogue, maybe he's the first guy willing to take on the big banks, a la, I don't know, Elliot Spitzer when he did that years ago. Or maybe this is a case where something else is going on. I'm curious what your reaction is to this New York regulator.
Well, you know, I only know what I'm reading.
Yeah.
And what I'm reading is that the bank had been cooperative since 2010 and has been giving them all the information that they wanted, and that it wasn't $250 billion. It was more, you know, in the tens of millions of dollars that is supposedly money laundered. Again, only the facts that are being presented, whether or not they're facts, but the information that's being presented. And also, what I'm left a little suspicious in the sense of what the issue is. And as I read about Lawsky, the prosecutor, they say he was born on a military base, and this issue has to do with money laundering for Iran. Mm-hmm. And then I read his statements, and he says that this money laundering is, quote, a global threat to peace and stability. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to talk about a stretch, I think that's one. Iran's not supposed to do any business. The United States and NATO actually have already declared war against Iran with the boycotting that they're doing, kind of similar to a playback of the 1930s, but instead of being Japan, it's Iran. So I wonder about his motives, and that's what has me a bit concerned, again, with the conflicting information. And why go to Britain when you have so many criminals right down the street from you in New York?
Yeah.
It's called Wall Street.
You know, I do hear your point, and there is a criticism that comes up that regulators will go after other countries' financial institutions and be much more tough than they are to their own. And I have seen that criticism with this case of Standard Chartered. So you bring up a lot of good issues, a lot of reasons to be skeptical of the media spin being given to this story now. So I do think that's important. Lest we continue the entire time talking about the financial system here in the U.S., since we are going overseas, we're talking about a UK bank. Let's talk about the Eurozone, because seems like everybody's on vacation in August. I keep reading that all of these leaders are making these bold statements and then taking off for vacation. Seems like things are really going to heat up in September. What do you think really is going to happen when everybody gets back from vacation in terms of the Eurozone crisis?
Well, you really nailed it, because they are, you know, the Europeans, you know, they're on vacation, as you said. And a lot of things do happen, by the way, in August, but this seems to be a lull time. September 12th is the date to watch, one day after September 11th. That's when the German Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, will meet, and they will decide whether or not there is a legality of the European stability mechanism and the fiscal stability pacts that have been passed to bail out the countries in the Eurozone. And there's another element in this that isn't making the news. And the big issue about this, I'll put it in perspective, is whether or not Germany itself, as well as the other European nations, are going to lose their sovereignty and bring it all up to Brussels. That's what this is really all about. So however the Constitutional Court, whatever they determine on September 12th, is going to have huge implications. Because if they say that this is illegal in reference to the German Constitution, the European Stability Mechanism, and the Fiscal Stability Pact, and taking the rights away from the Bundestag and bringing it to Brussels, boom, you could see the euro collapse in weeks, if not days, because Germany is the only one that's holding it up. This is a huge, huge issue, and it's barely making the news. And on the broader issue of it all, it's that all of the European nations under the G20 meeting and the other stability meetings are going to lose their sovereignty by building a central bank in Brussels that will truly mirror the central bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. So now we have a date to look to, September 12th, and this is when we will find out Germany's position finally, once and for all, it seems, on the ESM, which is that permanent bailout fund, and the fiscal pact, which are two of the major pillars of what the technocrats and the bureaucrats in Brussels are saying they need in order to solve this Eurozone crisis the way they see fit. And people have their different ideas about that, but it certainly could be a day of reckoning, it seems. We'll certainly see. Thank you so much, Gerald Celente, for coming and telling us all about it. He's founder of Trends Research Institute, publisher of the Trends Journal.
Thank you.
Let's wrap up with viewer feedback, shall we? Because I got probably our favorite comment that we've ever seen. Turbo Trana wrote, because we were having this debate over if there is age discrimination in the TV industry and if female anchors that are older get fired to hire younger women. I said that might apply more to men as well. So Turbo Trana said, male or female, I don't care. I just want honest, independent, and intelligent journalists who actually understand the subject matter at hand. At least we have them on this show. You warm our hearts. Thank you. This is why we come to work every day. I appreciate your comment sincerely. Now, that said, Dimitri did get into a little of a spat coming out of this topic. You can see a little snippet of it here. But what?
Well, you're out for blood. No, look, I agree. There's discrimination, but there's discrimination. Look, I'm saying something.
Oh, are you speechless, Dimitri? You're having a hard time spitting it out.
All right, look.
Well, Clueless in Chicago said it best. LL on top of her game. Dimitri, give the man an espresso. I will see to that because you know I have plenty of mine when it comes to coffee and caffeinated beverages. And 428 Ghost added, shouldn't Dimitri make a beeping sound when he backs up like that? So it's all in good fun. Dimitri thoroughly enjoyed that smackdown I gave him, and I thoroughly enjoyed your feedback on it. So hopefully we can recreate that. Meanwhile, Steve2323ZX writes, there are two kinds of people in the world, Lauren. Those who watch Capital Account and the people who stay uninformed and walk around like sheep to the slaughter. Well, we are glad that we are keeping sheep from the slaughter by watching our show in your view. Thank you for that. Now, Mr. Akam KK said, calling traders and bankers plumbers is an insult to plumbers everywhere. Next time you have a problem, why don't you call one of your buddies instead of us? Now, he was referring to what one of our guests on high frequency trading said when he said that he refers to these traders as plumbers. And I did want to clarify because I felt that was a little unfair and taken the wrong way, because I read his book where he discusses this, and he's talking about market plumbers, people that are very familiar with the market's plumbing and then can exploit it. So this is the way he characterizes these high-frequency trading experts and these algo robo experts that write these programs that find a way to exploit the market's plumbing, and that's what he meant by plumbers. So I don't think he was defaming actual plumbers, which we hold in high regard here on this show. Now, DMGER14 wrote in response to our Chris Powell of GATA interview, once again, excellent interview. He points out Alan Greenspan spoke of being able to lower the price of gold and mentioned leasing more gold to do it as though it were already going on. Precious metal manipulation creates weak hands that keeps prices suppressed. I think the best gauge of where PMs are cheap is foreign central bank accumulation. Interesting analysis there, and I do want to bring up that Alan Greenspan quote because we actually had it for the Chris Powell show and ran out of time to show it. He said to Congress, this was in 1998, I believe, he was talking about the suppression of commodities by private counterparties, and he said private counterparties, they can't restrict supplies of gold, another commodity whose derivatives are often traded over the counter, where central banks stand ready to lease gold in increasing quantities should the price rise. So there is that factoid there for your information. Lots of more information like that on GATA's website. And TABLG1 says, why is 2236 and on cut off? They edited the source documents. Now, there were a couple comments about this time code. There was a little glitch on the YouTube video. Anytime we have a live guest, we don't edit it. No way to do that. We wouldn't want to. We just want to make sure you know that that was just some kind of weird video glitch. And with that, that is our show for today. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to come back to, not tomorrow, come back on Monday for a fresh week of amazing shows. We're supposed to have Neil Borofsky on, who I mentioned earlier in the show. He's out with the new book, Bailout. And in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Lauren Lister. Give us feedback at youtube.com/capitalaccount, and have a great night.